My next guest has a Bachelor of Art, Psychology from Memorial University, a master's degree in human sexuality with a specialty in couples therapy. She started in the psychology department of St. John's Healthcare Corporation, now Eastern Health, in 1996. As a clinical sexologist, she started the sexuality program for Eastern Health. She has given workshops and seminars most of her career and developed and taught curriculum for health and social agencies in the areas of developmental disabilities, behavior therapy, and sexuality. This included contributions to the sexuality curriculum for the Medical School of Mon and the provincial government, and the development of the sexuality education textbook for the provincial schools. Welcome, NenaSandoval.
Welcome. Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Let's get right into this right away. So what is a sexologist, and how is it different from a sex therapist?
Well, I think a clinical sexologist is what people would think a sex therapist is. They specialize in assessing and treating a variety of sexual concerns, both as an individual and as couples.
Is there such a thing as an addiction to sex, as Tiger Woods claimed many, many years ago? Many people would say, so then why get involved with other people? Why not be addicted to your own partner?
The word addiction and sex together is not something that psychology, psychiatry, and sexology agree with, because just like food, drink, not alcohol, but food, beverages, sexuality, these are things that can be overdone. And when people look at sexual addictions, when someone says, I'm a sex addict, they're often meaning that they're having sex so often that it's interfering with their life, their relationships, their work, their economy, and and so obviously it's creating dysfunction for the person. But the thing is that you can't be addicted to something that you're going to need, like food, or, some people that are like walk excessively, they're compulsive about walking because they feel the more they do, the better it's going to be. But what happens is in sexuality is that sometimes individuals get more than just the connection and that pleasure. They may get validation as a human, or they may feel attractive, they may feel powerful, masculine, feminine, but there's secondary gain to the sexuality, and they need it. And so I do see an awful lot of individuals that describe themselves to be sexual addicts, but when you look at it, it's basically, having sex is not the problem, it's having it compulsively, meaning that they need to have it. They have no forethought. They will just say, I need it, I'm going to get it. And so that becomes a problem, because often that looks like going online, that looks like going downtown, that looks like a lot of different things, but the bottom line, it hurts relationships.
So the point that you're making is if it's interfering with your relationship, with your work, then that's when it's considered a problem.
That's right. Because if your behavior is not impacting your quality of life, your relationships, your economy, your job, obviously whatever you're doing is innocuous. It's not impactful. But often when you're dealing with relationships and sexual compulsion, unless someone is by themselves, a single person, and getting their sexual needs met on a when necessary basis, it's very difficult to be in a relationship with somebody with sexual compulsivity.
Is the root cause always the same? Like, I would look at something like, does it come back to self-esteem? Does it come back to validation? Does it come back to, well, the more people I sleep with and have sex with, it feeds my ego?
There's many reasons. Absolutely. It's not one. It obviously is validating for them in some way, or positive for them, reinforcing for them. And it could be because they saw that kind of behavior in the family, like dad or uncles or brother. It could be that they just were maybe ignored as an adolescent, and now that they're working and they're viable, they have this chance now, and they're going to prove that they're, viable as a sexual partner,
There's more to what they're doing than just the act of sex. They're getting something else from that.
Well, basically, when you have compulsivity, their actions are compulsive. There's very little forethought. It'll happen like, oh my gosh, she's pretty. Oh my God, there's a dance tonight. Oh my goodness. And then they might start to say, well, this is where I, can probably meet people. Because there are people that just want to have sex, not want to have relationships, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the compulsive sexual person usually gets into my office because of going outside their relationship. So they're there to help the couple get back on track.
Would people use that as an excuse? As an example, I have a sexual compulsion, therefore I'm not responsible for my actions?
Well, that's when the word addiction comes up. Okay, I'm addicted to sex, and the thing is that you're addicted to sex just like you're addicted to food. You're not. These are typical things of parts of life. It's overusing them or using them unnecessarily. And we've all sat down. I don't know about you, but I've sat down and eaten a whole container of Haagen-Dazs, once in a while. But it's not part of my routine, right?
Yeah.
If I did that, there's a lot of consequences for doing those kinds of things. I mean, I do see clients that will say, and these are typically male, that will say, I'm addicted to sexuality. And when you look at it and you break down their behaviors, it's just that sex is sort of an all-purpose kind of way of feeling good. It's morning. Okay, it's evening. It's Friday. But sexuality, but what I'm getting at is sexuality is that important to them that they will act on it. Like it's not a thing. It's almost like somebody who loves a certain kind of food. The sooner they smell it, they get like, I can picture myself eating and all the rest of it. What will I drink with that? Well, that's the sexual compulsive. When they see that there's some element of attraction, they're going to embellish it and just to foster their need to be sexual.
Do you want to explain to your listeners about WWW and what the percentage of...
Oh, yeah. Yes, research. There's been a lot of research on children, especially young male children, so under 18, viewing pornography. And there was a health study done online in Ontario. I think it was like 2009-ish. Where they were just doing general health questions, but they figured they would ask, while they were doing this, the health questions, they were asking about, have you ever watched porn, and these were like 15-year-olds. And basically, most of the 15-year-olds had been on porn sites, most of them. And a lot of them, in further research about their health, the ones that had been on porn sites had a higher incidence of depression, lower levels of emotionality, and this the research took place in Quebec. Quebec has a sexology program at the University of Quebec in Montreal, and they were instrumental part of getting some of that research done. So we do know that more young men, boys, are on porn sites than girls, but the average person on a porn site is a 15-year-old boy. That's the statistic.
You mentioned about the percentage of porn sites
in
relation to the overall number.
What's 80% of all sites are porn sites.
80%
of all websites are porn related. But it is a very sexualized world. We are in a very sexualized world. I mean, you have reality television talking about all kinds of sexual activities. None of them, unfortunately, talk about nurturing relationships or, something that's non-fantastical, like, I'm getting a rib removed so I can be skinnier or something like that. But what about typical people and their sex lives, and their love lives? They're living a typical life when we're being shown for all intents and purposes a fantastical life revolving around sexuality, which, unless we're a Kardashian, we're not going to ever reach. So we do have a lot of glamour and attached to sexuality sometimes, that it's sexy and that it is sexy but glamorous, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Fashion, it's part of fashion.
What's the biggest issue?
The number one problem in my office is deception. There are people that might have a compulsion, and like I said, sometimes the offending partner may say, well, I'm addicted and I'm this and like, and then sort of like want to escape any kind of responsibility. Even the compulsive have responsibility over their own behavior. That's it. Unless they're delusional, not in touch with reality, you are in charge of that behavior. And the thing is there's all kinds of ways that you can access to self-control, and therapy. And because it is a going concern, I mean, you can go online and fill in a questionnaire. Are you a sex addict? Are you or are you sexually compulsive? And sometimes I'll ask my client, have you done that? Have you done that? And 9 times out of 10, yes. What was your score? Off the charts or something like that. But often the reason why they're there, if they have a sexual compulsion, they seek treatment because of their partner, their dedicated partner. Somebody that's on their own rarely would come in. I mean, they have, but maybe once or twice. But it's the partner that often gets them into therapy.
It's interesting that deception can actually help somebody.
It's unfortunate, but and the thing is, it depends on how many times the deception happened, the history. Like if they're connected on enough levels, not just the sexual one, but in other ways connected. And I always say to clients, especially clients that are sexually compulsive, I say, anybody can have sex, but you can walk anywhere and say, hey. Anyone up for something? But not everybody can have a relationship. And so you want, I don't know, I like to honor relationships. They are sacred in their own ways. Often, people who, you have a lifelong partner, you want that connectedness to last the whole way. But often through the lifespan, you have different changes in partners' health, interests, mobility, things like that. And as long as couples communicate the same way, I don't mean just like in English or French. I'm saying that the way they talk, they are both connected to that. Because one of the things I think one of the biggest things I give couples is a communication guidelines on what to do and what not to do. And the one thing that couples should not do is bring up the negative past to help understand the problem. Bring up what was working. Bring up what was working. You could remember when you did that, and remember in 1949, when we joined, that was horrible. But the thing is that if we look at having trusting and respectful conversations about sexuality and being aware of reactivity, you'll get further with getting your wants and needs met.
Because it's always the other person's fault, right?
No. That's the thing that's why I'm saying that you have to verbalize
exactly.
that.
That's what I'm
you
saying.
You have
exactly.
to verbalize it.
So it's easy to say it's not my fault,
that's
it's your
right.
fault, right?
Finger pointing
Because
doesn't
it's
work.
something you did 25 years ago, right?
But that's the thing. Remember that time?
Yeah.
And we can't be at that. I mean, and the thing is, if that negative event is 1x problematic to you, every time you bring it up, it's 2x, it's 3x, it's 4x. Yeah. It's almost like it becomes then like a wound. So we have to leave things sometimes where they are and just learn from them going forward.
How does a partner delicately say no?
How do they say no? By making sure that before they come to that situation, they've talked about that. Because when you're in the midst of being sexual or trying to be romantic, well, how am I going to do this now? Where does this go? I mean, you don't really want to leave that to the last minute. You want to be able to say in a non-sexual context, like in the kitchen or whatever, but to talk about, well, when we do that on Wednesdays? Well, I just read this or I just saw this and I'd like to share that with you, and I think might be interesting. I've never da-da-da before, or I've never la-la-la before. And so then you start to negotiate. There may be some coyness, some embarrassment, but that can be very attractive. That sort of innocence and, let's try this thing. Because it's your world, you and your partner. It's nobody's business. As long as what you're doing is healthy, doesn't break the law, and makes you happy, that's normal in my book.
Nina, you talked about pornography and the addiction to pornography, but what about a healthy side of pornography? Is there something good that can come out of pornography when both couples want to experiment with that?
Yes, I think there can, and because there's many different levels of pornography, and even sexologists do have, we do know the types of pornography that are made that are, healthy towards males, females. They don't depict violence. They don't promote harm, and you can get them from therapeutic places for that, reason. So I have given some, in the day we used to give tapes to couples that were done by individuals who were real couples that had a sexologist, not me, of course, who were into the production of that. So yes, pornography can help couples, try different things. It can give them something to discuss about their own sexuality, their feelings, their fears. The only thing is, you don't want pornography to replace your partner. Women tend not to be as visually oriented sexually as they are emotionally and tactilely. And so, pornography should be something that both enjoy, not something that only one is enjoying, the other one can't wait to get off the couch. But it's something that, it can promote some ideas with them. It actually, for some couples, they've laughed themselves silly because just like, I can't reach, or where are you? So it can also just be an intimate adventure. When you're trying something together as a couple that is going to be embarrassing or difficult, that increases intimacy. And intimacy isn't love, and it isn't sex. It's a trusting relationship based on the ability to be vulnerable with somebody. And when you're allowed to be vulnerable, then sexuality can become a lot more promising and more comfortable.
You also help individuals, both children and adults, with challenging needs who have difficulty with social sexual skills.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Well, some of the individuals I see are younger, and some have been in, difficult early family situations, which made them have a difficult time adjusting, especially on the social level. And I am a developmental sexologist because I do treat children, I do treat adults that have developmental challenges. And so basically, which means that I'm a behavior analyst and a behavior therapist. And so helping them develop better social skills, better self-esteem, better coping strategies, and I work with a team of amazing people at Key Assets who are all trained in developmental approaches to children who have difficulties of a variety of things. But I specialize in the social sexual, and with teaching sex education, proper sex education, with healthy messages about self-protection, reducing children and adults' vulnerability from being taken advantage of in any social way or, any sexual way. So it's just about making people a lot more self-protective in a world where there's so much
Predators?
predators. And the thing is that a lot of the clients that I see don't have a lot of friendships naturally. We do our best to try, and many will eventually be in a place where they will have some friendships. But fostering friendships has to be done very carefully with vulnerable people. And it's just a plug for Key Assets that they are super trained in that whole field.
How would you advise parents to deal with the topic of sex with their children? How young would you start on something like that? My parents never told me anything. I'm just kind of winging it, until you learn. So what advice would you give?
Well, I'm one of the very few where I was sat down by my mother, God bless her, and she told us every single thing. I was 12. And because I was developing, I was like a codfish. I just didn't speak. What? Where my younger sister was like, where do you do it? When do I have to do that? It was two different developmental levels of people. Me being a teenager and my sister being more of a child, and the way we looked at it. But it was I can't believe my mother she did a great job. And I will always thank her for that. And the reason why she did it is because someone told us what it was. And we said, Mom, someone told us this, what, that, when. She goes, okie dokie. And she told us. And I was horrified. And I couldn't speak. My sister said, anyway, I can get out of that. But it was wonderful that my mother told me. I was so glad. Now, generally speaking, when a child asks, you give them some answer. Even if you say, well, that's a good that's a good question, and I'm going to find you a good answer, and then you hurriedly look for one. But I think that you've got to start preparing yourself to be asked a question about some type of romance, sexuality, by the time the kid is 3. So have that answer ready. The child is verbal.
Yeah.
Listen, I have a grandniece in my dear. Like, she's observant. And you just need to know. And there's wonderful books. You can go to chapters and look at that. Look at, sex education and your child, things like that. Because you want to also, be consistent with your own value system and and your religion. And I mean, because sexuality is a very intimate thing. And ideally, parents would be the one to give them the education, because research has shown that most kids want their parents to be the ones to do the sex education.
Do you do both parents talk to the child, or does the same-sex parent talk to the? Is there any rule of thumb there?
No, the parents should be, they should have a united front. I mean, the parents, like, they both endorse it, but they have to be very sensitive to the child's verbal skills and sensitive to the child's developmental skills, what they can handle, words that they should and should not use. But the thing is, I often, I hear parents go, my daughter came home from school and said and asked me, what is a blank? And then they didn't know what to do. And I said, well, then that's why you buy time and say, well, you know what? That's a good question, and I'm going to give you the best answer. So anyway, here's your snack. And then you go and then you call someone. But then that's where Amazon.com comes in handy when you're looking, because they have educational books right to when children are first talking, when they're nonverbal, the kinds of things like should you take a bath with your child and what age? And there's all kinds of different questions that parents have.
Nena, great conversation. And I'm sure there are singles listening, there are couples listening. What's the best advice you can give couples? Like, what can they do to stay together?
Well, first, and this sounds cliche, but it's so true, it's communication. And it's using the same kind of communication. Also, making sure when you're communicating that emotions are still and steady. They're not, that no one's going into that conversation angry, anxious, hurt. You want it to be a clean conversation. You want it not to be mired in doubt and things like that. So, when I give couples a communication sheet, don't bring up the negative past. Give examples of what went right. Always begin with a positive, and we know those things, right? Like, you're a good dad, and you're this, and that. But
and that negates everything that you just said, because when you say "but," you say, "Forget what I just said. This is what I really mean."
So that's why you say you basically say, actually this is my concern, but I love you.
The
that
opposite.
It would be the opposite.
opposite, yeah.
But I love you so much. That's why I'm here. You're a great, parent and all the rest of it. So yeah, and every couple has its own dynamic, and so you have to be very sensitive to your own dynamic and not go beyond it. Like reading a script. I love you, you are a nice person, and, that kind of thing. It's got to be meaningful, and so you really need to listen to your partner about, things that they tell you, like, for example, I wish you'd have told me first about that thing, then, like retrospectively with a little touch of resentment. We need to reduce resentments by being aware at the time of what we're saying as a couple, in terms of avoiding arguments, delaying them, postponing them till you can actually both are even tempered.
So really, when you look at that communications, the sole objective should be for both people to feel better after the conversation, to create a win-win so that both people win.
Well, basically, it's usually the problem solving. You want both to have a solution, because it's in that problem solving where you have two sometimes opposing or conflicting slightly opinions, and you want to get to somewhere where you both can live with it. And so communication is sometimes getting the best strategies. I always say to couples, like, if you're getting frustrated with language, with talking, write down your solutions. There's nothing wrong with writing them down, and then swap them out, and then look at their partner's solutions and tick the ones that you can see would be valuable, because sometimes people talk too much.
Nena, great conversation. Thanks. I know you're busy. Thanks for coming in and sharing your wisdom with our listeners.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you. I really enjoyed it, and again, it was a great conversation today.
That's all for this week. I'll be back next week with another interesting guest. Bye-bye for now.